What's going on, YouTube? Is by Isaac Lewis here, and I'm back with episode 2 of writing a new book from start to finish. But before I continue, if you like content like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And also click that bell for notifications so you can be uploaded when I upload content like this. So without further ado, let's get to it. So I just finished storyboarding and going through the process of writing out that first chapter. That is one of the biggest steps that we as authors or new authors or veteran authors have to do and that's first getting it out on paper, getting that first chapter out on paper. And once it's down, then everything else becomes a little bit easier. So one of the things that I was focusing on primarily this particular moment in writing this book, if you haven't started querying agents and you don't know what different publishing houses are looking for, doing research in your genre is important. Go back to episode 1 if you haven't figured that out yet. Go back to episode 1 because I spoke a little bit about that as far as what are your specific needs going to be when you're writing your book and you're writing styles. But now we're talking about word count. And that's going to be important because word count there is a minimum, there is a guideline as far as what your book how long your book should be written, and what our agents or editors willing to take as far as the project. What are the requirements as far as the length of your book? Like I said, and if you are writing a sci-fi novel, fantasy novel, be looking to write at least anywhere between 80,000 words to 120 or more, or greater. But like I said, if you are a new author, you should try to stay in between that 80 to 100,000 word range. I kind of made that mishap with my first book. I wrote my first book and it was only 60,000 words long, so it's kind of like a short story. However, I do plan on going back and making the second edition of that book. Maybe not now, but in the future. But as of right now, I'm focusing on this current project that I'm working on, which is my new book. I'm writing this book a little bit more different, and my knowledge is a lot better than I originally had when I first started writing this book. So for instance, one thing that I do know is that word count. Word count is important. It's important to keep up with your word count, because if you're writing a chapter and you're just writing and you're writing and you're writing, and next thing you know, you look up and you have a 6,000 to 8,000 word chapter, that calls for some concern because nobody actually really wants to read a chapter that long. It's like continuing pages and the reader is not being rewarded. So you want to make sure you are rewarding your readers if you're going to be writing these books. And should be a reward, and you want to end these chapters off strong, so that way it can be that page turning book that everybody wants to read and don't want to put down. And not only they don't want to put it down, but they rather give it away and have somebody else read it because it's just that good of a book. So that's just some things that you got to keep in mind is the word count. So chapters, of course, if you're writing a book, you're probably going to write you're going to be using the traditional formatting, which is a chapter book. So this topic is strange because my first book, I titled each one of my chapters. It's a 22-page chapter book, and I titled each one of my chapters. And what I figured in the process, I started to feel like it was becoming more of a nuisance. Not more so of a nuisance, but more so it took more cognitive processing to come up with these titles of each chapter, versus some of the styles that I've been seeing where it's labeled 1, 2, 3, and that's a lot easier. You can continue the story without giving readers an idea about what's going on with the chapter, just reading the title. But if they're reading a book, then they already know how the book is going to be flowing and what's going to be coming up next. It also actually gives a little mystery not knowing what the title is, because if you go from chapter 2 where an event just occurred, you're like, oh man, I gotta figure out what's going on next, or what's gonna happen in the next chapter. You flip the page and you just see 3, then it kind of it's like a foundation just laid out already, or like a runway for an airplane to take off. You just gotta keep reading until it takes off. And that in itself has elements of a page turning book if you think about it. So that's one of the things that I will be using with this new book that I'm going to be writing. I think it just helps readers continue reading. It's like it just helps readers continue to turn that page, wanting to get through the book as far as the reward for the readers. Now with the word count, back to the word count, if you are writing sci-fi or fantasy, and I told you the minimum is between 8,000 to maybe 80,000 words to 100,000 words or greater, I'll be cautious of going over 100,000, 120,000 words for your book, because what agents want to represent is books that will sell, and they're not gonna, and it's kind of hard to sell encyclopedias if you think about it. So you don't want to write your book too long, or you don't want it to write it too short. You got to be a nice in between. And I think that nice in between is anywhere between 80 to 100,000 words, which is, I think, it's phenomenal. So that's a nice chapter size book. And actually, so if you think about it, this is what a 120,000 page book looks like. This is the thickness. And anything over this is going to be too big or too thick of a read, and a lot of people will eventually pass on that because it's going to probably be an investment. It's going to be a time investment. All these books are investments. If you write a book, you're going to be spending your time writing this book and enjoying it as you write it, and you want somebody else to read it. But unfortunately, how you felt about the book as the author, a reader may not feel that same feeling that you will have writing it. So it's going to be more so of a drag versus an interesting read that you're creating. And another thing is, one thing that I started doing is I started charting my book. I wrote my first chapter and I had this idea for the book. I already had the plot was already created before I started writing, but there's other things I needed to develop, like the environment the world is going to take place in, side characters, side quests, just different things that I need, different plots that I need to build up to my ultimately the end, the conclusion. So what I did was I went to Hobby Lobby and I got me a cork board and some handy dandy note cards or like note paper. So I actually will write down the events that's going to take place in my book as it goes from start to finish, and I pin it on my cork board. And that actually helps me keep my train of thought together so I can stay focused and continue to move forward without having to throw in these different plots and I never come back to them. Because don't get caught up in that point where you're going to be throwing in all these hooks, these unforeseen hooks and these interesting plots, and you end up not going back to answer them, or you answer them too shallow, where it would require more detail, because people want to know, because there is no simple answer for plots that are A plus grade. And now when I say A plus grade, I mean that's something that it's where your book took a turn for the unknown, and now the readers are like, okay, this is interesting, I want to see where this is going. But then you answer it and it's unsatisfying. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you are satisfying your readers. And remember, if you confuse, you lose. So sometimes it's actually better to keep your book as simple and readable as possible. There can be some complexity in your book, but also you got to remember that if you confuse, you lose. So the choice is yours, and that's going to depend on your writing style as a writer and author. So like I said, I'm going with the format. So I'm shooting for 4,000 words maybe per chapter, 3 to 4,000 words per chapter. The first chapter I wrote was 3,957. So I was just short of maybe a 4 or 5 sentences short of a 4,000 word chapter. That, which is not bad, honestly, if you think about it. It met my goal. I met my goal with the first chapter, expanding my universe, expanding the world, and informing the readers about what's going on in this particular moment and what could possibly be happening in the future, what to look out for. This is something that I thought would be a good idea because, like I said, some of the books that I've read and researched, they have a lot of information is put into that first chapter. That first chapter is crucial to know where your book is going to be flowing or going to control the flow of your book, especially if you are a thriller writer or a crime or mystery writer. The first chapter is crucial to how you're going to set the tone of your book as it continues. So make sure you are giving the readers the information that they need to digest, because you don't want to be introducing new plots and new items or new things, new terminology towards the end of the book, because that, like I said, if you confuse, you lose. That's not something you want to do. So go ahead and put everything in that first chapter, so that way you can let the readers know what's going on with the world. This new book that I'm writing has interesting AI technology in it, so a lot of things with this book is going to be key of, like, as far as with AI technology, and everything is going to be ran off this type of technology. So, and I'm giving all that up front because I don't want to lose my readers later on down the road once the plot starts to thicken. And the same way with you, if you can be doing the same thing. This is why I always say, make sure you're doing research in your genre and know what people want to read. And that's as simple as going to Barnes & Nobles and, like I said, grabbing books from your genre off the bookshelf and just simply cracking it open and reading the first chapter. And that's going to be some of the best things. That's going to be some of the best research you'll do. And it's free. It only costs you your time, because going to Barnes & Nobles and popping open and reading the first chapter of the books on your first shelf, on the shelf, pretty much at shoulder level, those are the books you're going to want to read, because that's what's being bought. That's what's being sold. And by reading those books, you'll get an understanding for how do you want to write your first chapter, how you need to write your first chapter, what's going to catch the agent's attention, what's going to catch the publisher's attention. That's where it's going, and this is where it's at. So if you are writing your first chapter, or if you have started writing your first chapter and you're continuing writing your first chapter, I would stop. Just make sure you have read and did what I said in episode 1, and you've read and done your research about your genre and what's being published. Then once you do that, make sure you are pacing yourself to where you can hit that 80,000 to 100,000 word minimum as you get towards the end of your book. And that's going to be a goal. That should be one of your goals, because like I said, a lot of agents don't want to look at or represent books that are 60,000, 70,000 words long. The best thing for you to do is just make sure you are hitting those goals. And like I said, they look for books that will sell. And it goes from the word count to the story to everything, sci-fi, fiction, fantasy. Those are the top two books and genres sold in right now. So fantasy, sci-fi, crime, thriller, those books are being sold constantly, top 10 genres. So just make sure you know that and you are aware of that. Yeah, so I think that's it for this episode, guys. So like I said, just keep writing. Remember, try to write every day if you can. I work full time, so I'm not able to write every day. I wish I could. Maybe when I get a schedule change with my current job, maybe they're moving back to days, because right now I'm working nights and it sucks. And I'm tired. I'm always tired because I'm adjusting. I've only been doing it for like 2 months. And maybe when I get back to day shift, I can start getting that pattern back where I can write at least 1 to 2 hours a day. 1 to 2 hours a day, guys, get your chapters completed by the week. Write slow paced and make sure your writing is punchy. Get to the point. You got to deliver your message. And that's one thing that I did notice about writing short books, is that as a first-time author, I just wanted to write and I just like a machine gun. I just wrote away. But then I had to go back and reword some things, because the wording was kind of like a little weak. So you got to go back and you actually have to make some more punchier lines between characters, especially where those scenes that you need to deliver, where it's time to deliver. And when it's time to deliver, you will know, because it's going to be those scenes, going to be real intense, or it's going to be something that's been discovered that is going to be brought to attention of a certain person, and then you know that's when it's time to bring your A game. Pull out those books, pull out those adverbs, pull out those adjectives, and just get after it. That's what writing is about, guys. It's fun. This is something that you should do because you enjoy it, not because you want to or need to, but you enjoy it. Because writing a book is something that if you don't enjoy, you're going to see that in your writing. You're going to see that you didn't enjoy writing it, and ultimately the reader will see the same thing. That's it for today, guys. Make sure you just write and keep going. Chapter 1 is in the book. Episode 2, this is a wrap for episode 2, guys, and I'll see you guys next time on episode 3. Peace out.